Pop Quiz, Year 4, Unit 4, The Postmodern World. This is the last unit of Year 4. For many families, it's the last unit of a 4-year rotation through history. This last unit brings us from the late 1960s to the present day. There are cultural and technological developments to cover: the Apollo mission to the moon, the personal computer revolution, the growth of the World Wide Web. There are also events that shook the world, such as September 11, 2001. Over the next 9 weeks, we'll see the Cold War come to a conclusion and observe a whole new kind of conflict emerge between radical Islam and the rest of the world. Both lower and upper grammar students round out their study of geography with an overview of the modern Middle East. This is perfect for families who continue with Tapestry next year. They turn the corner from the 21st century conflict between Jews and Arabs back to the roots of that ancient conflict in Year 1. Dialectic students study many of the details of this era. In fact, as in previous units, their readings are more fact-filled and detailed than are those of their older siblings. They'll complete their studies of the career of Mao Zedong, African decolonization, and the Vietnam War. As with students on other learning levels, core history readings also include information on American culture, sports, and presidential administrations. The major focus of this unit for rhetoric students remains a study of leadership. We have an excellent core resource for this, a highly readable account by David Gergen, who served on the White House staffs of 4 presidents in our period, Nixon, Ford, Reagan, and Clinton, and then wrote Eyewitness to Power, a study in leadership. Gergen's first-hand account of the men who shaped this unit is invaluable. Let's look ahead at Unit 4 week by week. Week 28 picks up the story of the American presidency with one of its sad chapters, the administration of Richard Nixon, who became president after Lyndon B. Johnson announced that he wouldn't run again. Nixon had both a brilliant side and a dark side to his character. Nixon campaigned on the promise of ending the Vietnam War with honor, and he was elected narrowly over Hubert Humphrey. In office, he inherited a weakened economy, the turmoil of the Vietnam War, and race rioting in the nation's cities. Though Nixon accomplished much in his time in office, he also disgraced both himself and all Americans by criminal behavior that led to his resignation. Week 29 is defined by the 2½ years that Gerald Ford was in office after Nixon's resignation. Ford had a very tough assignment: to restore the dignity of the presidential office. Early in his tenure, Ford decided to pardon Nixon of all crimes. He made this decision public very quickly, without adequate preparation. The surprise announcement frustrated citizens and staffers alike. Even though most historians think it was the right decision, it crippled Ford's prospects for re-election. We'll look at Ford's integrity, his policies, and the reasons he was not re-elected for a second term. In Week 30, our attention turns to another one-term president, Jimmy Carter. A self-proclaimed born-again Christian, Carter was an outsider to Washington, D.C. He had been a successful peanut farmer and governor in his home state of Georgia. Before these jobs, he had also served in the U.S. military. Carter was a hard worker and earnest man, but conditions in America and in the world made it hard for him to succeed, and his outsider status, which was such a benefit during the election campaign, worked against him when he actually tried to govern. Though he made some headway in international affairs, especially as a champion of human rights and in brokering the Camp David Accords between leaders in Israel and Egypt, the word that became associated with American life during his administration was malaise. Next, we study the 2 terms of Ronald Reagan, a revolutionary figure in American political life. Reagan had an optimistic vision of more freedom, less government, and a stronger military, and his gift of communication enabled him to dramatically change America's fiscal, military, and foreign policy. We'll learn about Reagan's strengths and weaknesses in Week 31. Week 32 centers on the one administration of George H.W. Bush. Many historians rate Bush as the most highly qualified man ever to be elected to the presidency. His resume and the length of time that he devoted to government service are indeed impressive. When one assesses his leadership, one sees a man with courage and vision, especially in foreign affairs. It was Bush who assembled a world coalition to halt the expansionist ambitions of Iraq's Saddam Hussein during the Persian Gulf War of 1991. Bush also presided over the end of the Cold War and the dissolution of the USSR, which was so sudden as to be bewildering to many. With America emerging from the Cold War as the world's lone superpower, Bush spoke of a new world order and worked to define it. We'll read about his efforts in all these matters and analyze why this successful war leader was defeated in his bid for re-election in 1992. Week 33 covers the rest of the 1990s. In this era, the baby boomers, those born in the decade or two after World War II, stepped into positions of power in American life. Bill Clinton, whose 2 administrations define this week's study, was the first baby boomer president, and in many ways was a good representative of that generation. Clinton had estimable personal and political gifts and talents, and his first administration seemed filled with hope and potential at its outset. But again, inexperience, personal failings, and major mistakes led to missed opportunities and failures for both Clinton and his wife Hillary, who was a full partner with her husband in his presidency. We'll study the story of the Clintons and the escalating polarization of American politics and society during the 1990s in this one jam-packed week plan, which brings us to the end of the 20th century. Week 34 covers the 2 terms of the 43rd President of the United States, George W. Bush, son of the 41st President. There are many fascinating parallels between the Bushes and the Adamses, the only other father-son pair to both be elected president. Students will note the parallels and go on to analyze Bush's leadership in its own right. Bush had enemies from the beginning of his tenure as a result of the razor-thin margin by which he was elected president. The defining event of Bush's administrations came on September 11, 2001, when al-Qaeda terrorists attacked America using commercial airliners during a time of peace. Bush's response was to initiate the War on Terror, which had many different facets, as students will learn. Though he had widespread support in both the nation and the world at first, Bush's decision to fight perceived threats with a preemptive invasion of Iraq divided America and fueled the hatred of his enemies, at home and abroad. We end our study of world history in week 35 with a look at the current president, Barack Obama. For rhetoric students, our analysis covers only his first year in office, centering the discussion on the claims and promises that Obama made while on the campaign trail in 2008, and then looking at what he's accomplished after 1 year in office. You can and should also cover any major events that have occurred in current events since that date. That brings us to the present, for now, but we still have 1 week left. Most students will use this week for review. For rhetoric level students, we finish off Tapestry with a capstone of their Year 1 Bible survey, the Book of Revelation. It's the perfect way to wrap up our tour of human history. We don't attempt to predict the future from this book. That's not our role. But we do want your children to know that even though mankind as a whole may seem to grow further and further from God, the Lord of history holds all things in his hands and will surely bring all things to his loving, sovereign ends. Some students will end their Tapestry journey on this note. For others, completing Tapestry Year 4 makes Year 1 that much more fascinating. Places that seemed obscure the first time through turn out to be much more important than one thought. What we've learned about history and humanity makes the ancient world more interesting and more relevant than ever. Almost 40 centuries ago, God called one man out of the moon-worshipping city of Ur to become the father of the faithful. It can seem like a fable, just a myth like all the others, until you remember that today 1 billion Christians and 1 billion Muslims look back to Father Abraham, and the peace of the planet may depend upon events yet to happen in the little land of Israel.